Fall camp is barely 2 days old for Sun Devil football, and there's already some huge news coming out of Tempe. So we're going to bring it to you here. Of course, this is Speak of the Devils. I'm Joe Healey. I have Brad Denny here with me. We are brought to you by DeFalco's Deli and with the support of our good friends at All AZ Sports. So the huge news coming out of fall camp. Michael Turk, punter extraordinaire, one of the best in the country, a two-time first-team All-Pac-12 punter, who is expected to stay atop the charts at his position across the conference and nation, has opted to enter the transfer portal. So that is huge, huge news at this point, as ASU is less than a month away from the start of its 2021 season. So, Brad, give what information we have at this time about Turk's decision to enter the transfer portal.
Yeah, so it's reported that Michael Turk is in the portal. And one interesting note, of course, as we touched on in our camp preview episode, is that it's past the deadline for him to be immediately eligible or to get that eligibility to play. So he for an FBS school, so his options now are kind of a little bit limited. He can transfer, sit out a year in a traditional way. He can drop down to FCS, play immediately. But as at the end of the day, ASU is going to be out one of the elite punters in the country, a two-time all-conference selection, a guy who is likely to probably make that three in a row had he stayed. But as the reasons why are seeming to come back on the hot button issue of our day, and that is vaccines. He has been adamantly outspoken against the vaccines on his YouTube channel. He's a guy that just kind of refuses to, and this kind of feeds into a larger issue. Of course, ASU went through a COVID hell a season ago, missing those games and having the widespread infections and everything. So obviously, it's already a sticky situation in that respect. You toss in even a little bit of the investigation in terms of the COVID dead period. So, but as reported by a few outlets, ASU has is going to have a policy that vaccinated players only can be traveling, and so that means is your all-conference punter become just a home game punter or something like that. So ultimately, it was a situation where player and program were at a crossroads. Michael Turk has been in the early stages of fall camp. He's been out there. So that it's interesting that the news broke today, already a few days into fall camp, but it just kind of feeds into a larger discussion. But ultimately, at this point, when you're a Sun Devil program that had the issues that you have, and just the medical, the health, the moral implications here, I think it's the right move to make to part your ways, because you don't want to have a season that has this level of importance, that has this potential be potentially derailed by some. You've seen this all over the NFL. You're seeing this with conferences around the country saying that, if they're unable to play a game, unlike last year, that they're not going to reschedule it. The forfeit is a real option now. So when you have these type of situations, no player is bigger than the program. And we're seeing that apparently with Michael Turk, ASU's all-conference punter.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, with the potential for cancellations, that's something that you can't afford in any season, let alone a year like this where ASU is trying to do everything that it possibly can to put itself in a position to potentially compete for or win the South Division title or something greater in the Pac-12 conference this year. So as surprising as this is, at least for us, who didn't really know the inner workings of this, as far as this being something that had already kind of been in development, ASU's got to move forward. You got to have a punter out there. I know a lot of folks on Twitter talk about, hey, let's just go for it on fourth down every time. And you know what? That'd be kind of fun to an extent. But I think you got to have a punter in major college football. So, Brad, what is ASU looking at in that regard as far as who's going to be the man to replace Turk now that he is parting ways with ASU?
A couple guys immediately jump to mind. Logan Tyler had great success at Florida State as a punter, but he's now firmly locked in the place kicker competition with Chase Feely. In fact, I was out there at practice earlier today, and Tyler looked pretty good. He made all his kicks. Chase Feely missed all his kicks. Actually, has had some issues with angles. I mean, he's been real low line drives. So Logan Tyler might be pulling double duty there. Or another option is incoming freshman Eddie Zaplicki. I actually paid attention to him during the punting sessions at today's practice, and he had, I got to say, maybe it's fortuitous timing, but he looked real good. I mean, he was launching some bombs, great spiral. Now, granted, no matter who the option is here, big shoe to fill with Michael Turk. I mean, he as a guy that comes out first game as a Sun Devil at the FBS level, sets the NCAA record, single game record. and obviously does what he does over the course of the last couple of seasons. So it's going to be massive shoes to fill. But you have a lefty and Logan Tyler. Maybe that's one kind of curveball type angle there. Perhaps it's Eddie Zaplicki, who is potentially probably going to be the guy in 2022 after Michael Turk presumably would have gone back into the NFL draft. So there's a couple options there, but at the end of the day, it's going to ASU special teams is taking a big hit there. I mean, you're not a better team without Michael Turk, but at the same point, perhaps you're a better positioned team because for all the just the personal reasons to get a vaccine. I mean, there's the option to just you got to help others. It's more than just yourself. And for a program that has been hit so hard so recently, like the Sun Devils, they're perhaps more sensitive than any other program out there to the risks of having an unvaccinated player in there and the potential complications there. And we talked about the risk to a season that has so much riding on it. So, it's unfortunate, but I think ultimately it's probably it's the right move for ASU. And I think it's the right move for the football reasons, for the health reasons, but you just wish that maybe that he had come around to see that, but he has his viewpoints that he's totally entitled to, and so wish him luck at the next level. But it's going to be a big hit, as we were talking in our camp preview. ASU special teams is looking pretty good in two key areas when you had two all-conference players at punter and returner, and now you all of a sudden just a couple days in the camp you got a big question mark coming up.
Yeah, it's something where ASU has been quite spoiled the past couple of years. It's pretty similar in nature to when you had Zane Gonzalez out there, plays kicker for 4 years, and then even if you have somebody replacing him who's above average, if you don't have an All-America caliber player out there in replacement of him, it makes it feel like a step down. So we will see what happens at punter. As you mentioned, Eddie Zaplicki is someone who was expected to be the man probably next year or whenever it were to take shape that he was going to take up after Michael Turk. We just didn't think it was going to be this year. Logan Tyler, you mentioned him as the possibility to pull double duty or even triple duty. History hasn't looked kindly on that, at least not for ASU. It doesn't happen a lot around here. The only one I can really think of in recent years, like Thomas Weber, when he did that, about 12 years or so, 12, 13 years ago. But he ended up, I think, having some physical issues because of the demand of what he was doing. That's something you don't necessarily think about a lot with kickers and them entering into some sort of physical peril because of the workload that they take on, but it is a possibility. And that would make a potentially bad situation even worse if you have the guy that you feel you can somewhat count on take on too much to the point that it creates an injury situation. So yeah, like you said, special teams as a whole is really becoming a potentially questionable issue, of course, outside of the kick returner and DJ Taylor, because he's got All-America next level stuff in that regard. So that's an area of the team as comfortable as folks are with those 20 plus returning starters on offense and defense, and just so much seniority and experience and talent across the board on offense and defense. Special teams is something that can really screw up the course of a game if there are flaws based in inexperience or lack of ability. So certainly, hopefully, ASU can right the ship. It can get some consistency in that regard. Obviously, it would be awesome if those things never really come to play and the Devils are blowing out every game. But life hasn't always been that great for Sun Devil fans as far as having nice things and comfortable wins and that sort of deal. So I don't think we're going to expect that too much this year. So we will see what the rest of fall camp brings if these first 2 days are any indication.
Yeah, I mean, I just hope that folks don't just overlook and say, "Oh, it's just the punter." Thankfully, and it's not like a Jaden Daniels situation. One of your key players is opting out or deciding to take this course of action. But I mean, the punting position is critical. I mean, he's a guy that can flip that field, and like we saw it from the get go against that punt against Kent State when he was on his goal line, kicked 85 yards with the roll. And so if you have a guy that can flip that field, and if you're making opposing offenses, having to go 75, 80 yards because your punter is able to pin him back deep against this veteran-loaded Sun Devil defense, over the course of a game, you're feeling pretty good about yourself. And some of the offensive questions we talked about in the last episode, as it gives them perhaps a little more leeway to work themselves out. So, maybe you hope for kind of a situation like a couple of years ago when Brandon Reese left, and then all of a sudden Zendejas had to kind of step up, and he performed pretty well at that time. And so perhaps, maybe one of these guys, maybe Eddie Zaplicki is that guy who his number gets called and he's able to kind of answer the bell and perform at a level that, hopefully there's not too much drop off. But, as we talked about, it's whoever gets that job, whoever the responsibility falls upon, it's going to be some big shoes to fill, and it's going to be a big hole for the Sun Devils. And hopefully it doesn't impact them too harshly going on forward in the 2021 season.
Yeah, you'd have to think that Zaplicki is the odds-on favorite. It just makes sense, and he is a scholarship player. He is a recruited player. It's not a circumstance that happens often at this position, where if in many other cases, if a Michael Turk or if a team's starting punter were to transfer at the 11th hour in a situation like this, most programs would be left with a walk-on in most cases, or some player that maybe they'd have a lot less trust in. So someone like Zaplicki, who is expected to be the future, I mean, that's a huge, huge deal that he is around. And as you mentioned, looking pretty good in what he's doing right now. And from this day forward, again, probably the odds on favorite. So he can take that mentality that he's kicking for right now to be the man on an experienced team where there's going to be demand on him because it's a win now situation for the Sun Devils in 2021. So he's going to be, quite possibly we're shifting gears now and looking at him right now as probably the most important freshman on this team if he is the punter out there.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's going to be a lot thrown on his plate, and if in fact he does win the job. And I mentioned it's early in fall camp, but he's looking good, and perhaps this is if it were to happen. It's good at the beginning of camp rather than just perhaps a week before, and then all of a sudden you have to kind of shift things around and try to fill that role that way. But whether it's Zaplicki, perhaps the veteran Tyler was able to perform double duty, or however the kicking situation rolls out, it's another big question mark for Herm Edwards and Sean Slocum to figure out.
Absolutely. Only a couple days into camp here. Already some big news, so stay tuned. To speak of the Devils, of course, a big shout out to DeFalco's Deli, and a big thank you to our great friends at All AZ Sports. I'm Joe Healey. He's Brad Denny. We're Speak of the Devils.